Let's walk through a real-world data analysis example. So in this example, what I'm doing is I'm charting out our accounts receivable invoice amounts by invoice date, and then we are showing the trends of all the payments that were applied to those invoices. So this is a nice visual. You can actually see when the payments are flowing in. This is a good way to report on your receivables and payments. But we're going to be doing this all using two different data files. We're going to have our invoice file, which is our invoice number, the invoice date, and the amount. We have a secondary table, which is our payments that were applied to those invoices. So starting from scratch, we just have the AR invoice and the AR receipt table. So first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that these are in a table. So if they're not, you can just select the data and hit Control T on your keypad to insert a table. Next step we're going to do is we're going to load these into Power Query. So we're just going to go to the Data tab, and we're going to go to From Table/Range. So from here, I'll just rename this table. So this is the AR invoice table. Close and load. We're going to do the same thing for the other table, the payments. So once again, over there, go to your Data tab and select From Table/Range. We can rename this as well. So this is our AR receipts. Alright, so let's flip back to the AR invoice table. First things first, as you can see here, this date is marked with a date timestamp, so we don't need the timestamp. Let's clean that up. So what I'll do is right click on the column, go to the transform, and then the first option is date only, so I'll click on that. As you can see, that cleans up our format for the date. We're going to hop over to the AR receipt, do the same thing. So first off, payment date, we'll right click on that, transform, date only. Also invoice date, same thing again, transform, date only. Alright, so we're going to hop back over to our AR invoice, and what we're going to now do is we're going to group this data. We don't really care about the actual, all the individual invoices, we just want this grouped based off the invoice date. So first things that we're going to do is we're going to choose those columns. So manage columns, choose columns, and we only need the date and the amount. So pull those. Now I'm going to select my date field, and I'm going to group this data. So I'm going to group it, so that way we can, so we're going to group the data by the date. So we're just going to, essentially it's like a pivot table, it's going to just summarize it. So we'll select sum of our amount field, we'll call this amount, and then as you can see that aggregates the data down to these 17 rows. So now let's hop back to the receipts. Can do a little cleanup here as well. Let's first off choose our columns. So in this example, we do not need the receipt and invoice detail. We're going to be using the invoice date to relate this back to our invoice table. So we just need the payment date, the amount paid, and the invoice date. So once we have that, we'll select another group by. From here, we can now say we want to sum our amount. This is where you're going to select the fields that you want it grouped by. So payment date, add another grouping for our invoice date, and we'll say this is the paid amount. Alright, so we got our two tables that are grouped, so that's good. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to first sort this by the invoice date, then going to sort by the payment date. So this is going to just help in regards to, obviously, the sorting of the columns. It'll make more sense in the next step here. So what we're going to now do is we're going to be pivoting the payment dates column. So we want that to be showing as our columns, not necessarily the rows. So we just select our payment date, and from there we're going to do a pivot. So we'll hop over to our transform tab, and we're going to select this pivot option, pivot column. So as you can see, it's saying, alright, what's the column for the amount? That's the paid. We'll leave it as a sum there. So now as you can see, what this is doing is it has our invoice date as the rows, similar to our AR invoice table. But now as you can see, the columns themselves are all the different payment dates with the sum of the payments as the values. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hop back to our AR invoice table, and we're going to merge our queries. So we're going to be combining the two queries together in one. So merge queries. It's going to say, how do you want these two to relate? So we're going to say this is going to be based off the invoice date. As you can see here, we have an exact match, so that's good. Hit OK. And from here, we need to expand those columns that we want. So we're gonna select this option up in the top right. We do not need the invoice date since it's the exact match of the invoice date that's already here. So we just want the actual columns, the payment columns. So select OK there. And I'm gonna go to my view query settings. I just want to remove this prefix on the columns. That way it only shows the date as the payments. Alright, so now we'll just close and load here. So once we have this complete, you just need to now insert our grand totals, and you can plug in whatever calculations you want. So I'm just going to scroll over to the table design. We'll go to the table style, throw in a grand total here. So now as you can see, column B is our total amount billed. We have, we'll add in a column for total paid. We just want to pull the payment columns. You can do a percentage if you'd like. Percentage paid. Take the total paid and divide it by the total amount billed. And then from there, you can just do your cleanup of your formatting. And as you can see, we now have our trending payments based off our amounts billed. So hopefully you learned something there. You can apply this to your own data. Like and subscribe, baby.